Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Ron. And one thing I just want to point out, like I think what you're planning to do this year in terms of just aligning things more effectively will take place in the introduction to online learning piece. And I think it's like super important, right, that as we try to set people up, that we are transparently saying like, well, you know, here's what online learning will look like for you given your placement and what curriculum the school or district may be asking you to do. So there doesn't become this like I'm doing something for one person and another for a different person, but it is aligned and people are aware of that from the get-go. So again, like connecting that experience and the consequences of it to messaging in the Ground Zero kickoff session. Yeah, and Rachel probably wants to add to that.
I just wanted to take it even a step more explicit. So one of the big ways that we've redesigned the online tutorials this year is to much more clearly delineate for core members, if you already have a tool, this is where you should go, and you should actually experience a different set of things than people who are creating that from scratch. And so the interface of what you're sharing with them through the SAT, their clarity about what they have given their placement, and then therefore what they should do as they move through the tutorials, and even their clarity that we have done something to customize for that particular situation really needs to come out of that introduction to online learning, because otherwise we'll have set this thing up and they'll get into it and they won't have any idea how to take advantage of all the work we put in to gather the right things for the SAT and all the work that we put in to make sure that they really have a customized route through these things.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I just wanted to say Katie is going to speak to that even more explicitly in our when we talk through the online courses. But I think that's super important. Daniel?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this ties closely with like Josh's concern. Like, I feel like last year, when reflecting on the way we messaged online courses, we talked about them much more as like, and then the end product is these are like, this is a vehicle to that. So if you already had an end product, if you already thought you pulled something out the SAT or whatever, you didn't understand that this was a means of developing your pedagogy knowledge. And I really think that like that ties closely to like Alternative Teach for America, because it's like what else do you want from me? And what I want is you to understand and whatever. So I think that's a key pitfall for just kind of underlying a lot of this.
And I think to Rachel's point, the learning from that has led to design modifications and pattern. Yeah, Armina.
Hi everybody. I'm not sure if this is the right time, but I have a follow-up question for Ron. Hey, Ron. And I think others too, this is something that we've been talking a lot about in New York, and I'm sure in other regions as well, just the alignment with schools and districts, both with resources and with training. And so with the situation like Ron explained, how can we work, or what are you doing, Ron, to align both timing? Because what if, like, I don't know, the timing of the online courses, the timing of our round zero training, doesn't match up with when our firms actually receive the materials that they're expected to use with their district or their schools. So I guess, like, one, I would love to hear about like, our thinking around that specifically, and then also two, how are you actually working with the schools or whoever or the districts? Like, what does that collaboration look like so that we're able to share our thinking and learn from them so that we can actually provide our firms with the training that is useful for them to take step into their schools? And I don't know if this is appropriate, but it's definitely something that's on my mind.
Yeah. So, Ron, you have 10 minutes to prepare your reply to that. I think it's a great question. I'd like us to use the planning time that we have at the end of that session, and we can come and connect with Ron or spend time like thinking through that more deliberately. So I want to make sure. I mean, I think it's a great question. It's a great dilemma to actually try and figure out. And Ron might be a good resource, or other people might be a good resource. Katie?
Yeah, I would just add as well, I think that is a common concern that people are sharing. I would be happy during the planning time to have people come and talk to me and think through ways that might look or different strategies that we might use. So Ron, maybe you and I could partner up and talk to folks during the planning time.
I'm sorry, I was...
That's okay. So anyway, that is the whole purpose of this planning time, is so that that kind of dilemma, we can actually, if we think that's going to be a real concern in our region, we can spend time like digging in and actually making changes in our plan that can account for that, or thinking through it. Okay, I'm not even placed yet. Jen, I think you have some experience with this, right?
Yeah. Some people know. Sorry, I'm hearing some background. So here's what happened last year in Miami-Dade. Historically, at least my first 2 years in the role, all of our core members were placed before they went to Institute. So they left us for Institute all with their placements, knowing at least where they're going to teach. They didn't always know what specific grade level and quantity they were going to teach, so we knew we had to think about that. So what happened last year is the economic wave kind of hit Miami-Dade early. And over the course of the summer, as we approached our Round Zero launch day, it became clear that none of our core members, in fact, were going to have jobs at all. So our landscape changed really dramatically over the course of the summer, and it wasn't really until the last week before the launch that it was for real, changing. And so at that point, we made some adjustments to our strategy, which were mostly grounded in retention and satisfaction, and how we were going to communicate and manage around the fact that no one had a job, versus a really strong strategy around and making sure that they're still effective. This is not to say we did not think about making them effective, but I think in our kind of approach to it, the more explicit plans were outlined around retention and satisfaction. So what this looked like is that in the Round Zero launch, the bulk of the meeting was really about being very transparent around what was going on with placements and jobs, laying out a really clear plan to manage core members' expectations around how we were going to communicate, exactly when they would hear from us if they didn't have a job, exactly what kind of communication that would be, how we would keep people that had jobs in the loop so that they knew how to support their colleagues. And then we executed that plan really well. So in some regard, we had good results with our retention and our satisfaction, and to some extent it even strengthened, I think, some of the core culture. However, with the effectiveness components, we had an initial strategy, which we said, okay, so instead of producing the outcomes of the tools themselves, we're going to modify how people engage with the online courses, and we're going to focus on building skill. And we rolled this out to them immediately after explaining why none of them had jobs, which didn't really engage people too poorly in those specific outcomes. And then we did not have a clear, crisp plan for managing then the actual execution and expectations of that effectiveness piece. So it's kind of like we set like the stage for you should build skill in this. Like here's a way to still do this online course and build skill, and we'll talk about it later. But then we didn't actually have a pathway for them of like, and here's when I will know if I'm building the appropriate skill, and here's how I'm going to engage with my PD, and here's how this fits into finding out about my job. So this year what we're doing to shift this, and still kind of not knowing, anticipating that this might be a scenario again, is to develop, first of all, a really clear path of expectations for everybody. So if you're traditionally placed, like this is literally, I've heard other people talk about this already at the conference, like this is your passport to kind of being Round Zero ready, or this is your like literal list of each component you're going to get, why it matters, how we're going to help you, and modifying that for our late place core members. So instead of saying, so now your timeline is 2 weeks later, and we're going to build your skill before then, like really mapping out, this is exactly what it looks like and when it's going to happen for them so that we can manage ourselves around it really clearly. The other piece that was a real gap for us is we didn't have a strong SAT last year, and so if the reality is, again, that nobody has a job on the Thursday before the first day of school, then we are going to need to make sure that they, as soon as they do get a job, don't necessarily need to spend the time and energy on the courses, creating those tools, that they can have a Unit 1 plan that they can implement, and we're going to focus our energy instead on building the skill around becoming Unit 2 ready, depending on exactly when in the school year, obviously, they're going to get their jobs. And then a big component of that, and this actually relates to what we were just talking about with alignment, is our district relationship and our principal relationships. So we've really prioritized building from the ground up the type of partnerships at the school level that would enable us to be really truly a team to bring on our core members. So while we don't know all the answers of where they would potentially be placed, we have some places where we historically have been, and we are using them to help us refine our plans, help us look at the SAP